Hello, welcome to our current patient webinar. I'm Angela, I work at Winona, and I'm gonna turn things over here shortly to Dr. Green to introduce himself and we'll get started. Everyone feel free to start adding your questions into the chat. Dr. Green, take it away.
Hi, so my name is Mike Green. I'm an OBGYN. I also happen to be the Chief Medical Officer of Winona, and maybe for some of you, your personal doctor. One of the big things I really believe in when it comes to medicine is that my job really is mostly as an educator. My job is to explain things in a way that you can understand, kind of set them out for you, and then you have to decide what's right for you, because ultimately it's your body and it's your journey. So that's kind of what we're here tonight, is to help educate, answer some questions, maybe some things that you've been wondering about, you didn't know the right way to ask or don't have somebody to ask. Very happy to educate and answer. This will go a whole lot better if you guys start typing some questions in. Otherwise, it's going to be really boring to just hear me chat on and on. I don't really have that much to say, but what I usually prepare a little monologue to give you a chance to get some questions in. And there's something that came up over the last week or two. Apparently there was a patient whose dog got exposed to the cream, the hormone cream, and had a reaction to it. And actually over the years, this happened a couple of times. I've had patients where for some reason the dog just loves the cream and starts licking it off their arms as soon as they apply it. And obviously that's not a good thing. And so if you have a dog that's in love with the cream and every time you put it on your arm starts licking it off your arms, then there's a couple of things you can do. One is to put it in a different place. So the inner thigh is a totally acceptable place to put the cream, a little bit harder place for your dog to get to. Or if it really becomes a problem, switch to either the patch or the pills. The problem wasn't so much just with the dog, but then I guess they were telling other people this story and people started freaking out. Oh my gosh, am I poisoning my kids? And you're not. So unless your kid is licking it off your arm, and if that's the case, tell them to knock it off, because it's a little easier to keep a kid from licking it off your arm than a dog. Even if you give your kid a hug or, cuddle, you're not going to get enough on your child to be an issue. The cream is completely absorbed within 30 minutes of application. If you're worried about it, again, use the inner thigh. That's another safe place to use it, and really should keep it away from your children. The back of the knee is another place if you're worried, about exposing your husband. But again, it takes a lot of exposure over a long period of time to really have any possibility of causing a problem. So it's really not something that you need to worry about. So just to kind of put everybody's mind at ease, I've had several patients writing in really worried that they were harming their children, and it's just not the case. It's really hard to imagine a situation where that could possibly happen. So the cream is very safe, and again, unless you've got somebody lapping it off of you, you're not going to have to worry about exposure. So hopefully we got some questions. Otherwise, I'll have to tell you some more funky stories. Let's see.
We have some, yeah, we do. We have a good question, and I'm glad this person's asking because it does come up a lot in the group. Sarah says she sees a lot of people in the Facebook group that have stopped taking DHEA for a variety of reasons, including weight gain, acne, mood changes, etc. Are these common side effects?
Great question. So the answer is not really. First of all, the weight gain, absolutely not. DHEA should help you lose weight. Can you eat too much and take DHEA and gain weight? Absolutely. But DHEA, if anything, should make it easier to lose weight rather than gain weight. So I think the whole idea that DHEA is causing weight gain, I don't think it really does that. Now, any hormone can cause some water retention when it's first started, but that's a temporary thing, will go away with time. But really, DHEA should not cause weight gain. It can cause some of the other things. So DHEA can cause acne, it can cause mood changes in some people, but it's really pretty rare at the dose that we prescribe. And when it happens, it's usually just at the beginning of treatment, and it usually goes away on its own. So the acne, for instance, you maybe get an acne flare when you first start it, But if you push through, that acne clears up, and then it usually doesn't come back. Every now and then you have somebody that's really sensitive to it, and it becomes a problem and they have to stop it. But really, that's the exception rather than the rule. And the same thing with mood changes. Every now and then, it does boost the testosterone up a little bit, and that can give people sort of this aggressive mood. But again, that's really unusual, and it usually goes away pretty quickly. The other thing is that, and I'm not really sure why this happens, but sometimes people start the medicine and they get, some mood changes. And so they stop the DHEA. And then I tell them, wait a month or so and start it back up again. And a lot of times doing that fixes the problem and the mood changes aren't there anymore. So those are strategies that you can use. The Facebook group is great. It really is. But it's still social media. And the truth of the matter is, if somebody has a bad experience with something, they're much more likely to make a post about it on social media than somebody if everything's going great. I mean, the truth is, if everything's going great, normal, everything's going great and normal, and you kind of don't pause out of your day to make a post saying, yeah, I feel fine. If there's a problem, those are the people that tend to make posts. It's just human nature and it's natural. And so there's something, called reporting bias. And that is that somebody who's unhappy or having a problem is much more likely to report that than when everything's going well. And so you tend to see these themes on Facebook from that very small group of patients that's having problems. And so you think, oh, gee, everybody's having this problem. But no, it's just that the ones that have problems tend to be more vocal than the ones where everything's going well. And you can imagine, that's a pretty normal thing. So that's the thing with DHEA. For most people, it's very helpful. There is a small minority of patients that, like anything, have side effects. And for those people, they sometimes need to stop it. But it always kind of makes me sad when somebody writes in and says, I read all this stuff on Facebook, and so I decided not to try the DHEA. It's like, well, you're missing out on some real potential benefit because of a very small chance of something that could go wrong. But this fear kind of gets going and people lose out from it. So that's the thing. See how it works for you. For most people, it works well. Occasionally, like anything, there can be sensitivities and side effects. So that's probably a lot more information than you needed, but
don't get tired of DHEA yet, because Gina has another question about that, and she wants to know what else you can say about DHEA, what it is, what are the benefits, and the long-term use, that kind of stuff.
So DHEA is a hormone that when you take it, your body breaks it down into estrogen and testosterone. In fact, it's pretty much completely broken down within 30 minutes of ingestion. That's different than something called DHEA-S or DHEA sulfate. So there is a supplement called DHEA-S, which is a lot more stable, and that gets in your body and stays there, and it's a way to up DHEA levels. That's not what we're interested in. We're using DHEA as a way to get your testosterone levels up. And a lot of people are like, wait a minute, testosterone is a male hormone. Well, that's the way we think about it, and it is much higher in males, but women need a little bit of testosterone as well. And the ovary is responsible for making the testosterone. And so as you go through the menopause transition and the ovary becomes less efficient at making hormones, the testosterone levels can suffer as well. Testosterone is important for women. It helps all kinds of things. It helps with weight loss. It helps with sex drive, libido. It helps with energy. And so it's a way of getting testosterone levels up. Now, you might ask, why not just give testosterone? And certainly people do that. There's two reasons for that. The first is a very practical reason. Testosterone is a controlled substance, and we really can't do it through the telehealth format that we have at Winona. But also, testosterone's tricky, especially for women. It's really easy to overshoot and give too much testosterone. If you give a woman too much testosterone, she starts having side effects that are these sort of male pattern side effects, male pattern balding, the acne that we talked about before. You can even have voice deepening. The clitoris can get really large, almost like a small penis. And you'll see, bodybuilders can have these side effects. And so if you mess up with the testosterone and you go a little too far, you can really cause problems. The nice thing about DHEA is that in the 25 to 50 milligram dose, we don't have to worry about that. So it's a really convenient and safe way of getting those testosterone levels up to normal female levels without overshooting and pushing them into almost a transitioning process which is not necessarily what we're going for. Just DHEA in really high doses is used as a performance-enhancing drug. And there are people, bodybuilders and this type of thing, that use very high doses of DHEA and end up with those testosterone side effects. That's not what we're doing here. We're using really small doses, just enough to get the testosterone level up to where it's supposed to be in the normal female body, and get you feeling, that normal good self that you felt before this menopause transition started. The DHA is safe to use as long as you need it, as long as it's giving you benefit. There really isn't any kind of long-term risk to continuing using it. So that's all I have to say about that.
Good. That's nice. We've cleared up a lot of DHEA questions. Hopefully everybody that will resonate. Elizabeth has a question about the cyclic approach to HRT. She says she's perimenopausal, trying a cyclic approach to HRT. I used the patch continuously, and last month oral progesterone days 14 to 28, but now on day 34, I still haven't had a period, and I'm not sure how to proceed.
It's funny. 5 minutes, 10 minutes before I signed on, one of my doctors asked me about this, and I explained this to them. My personal opinion, there's no reason to use cyclic progesterone. And this is exactly why. It gets really complicated. It gets frustrating because people don't have exact 28-day cycles. The right way to use progesterone for the perimenopause or for menopause is just take a progesterone pill every day. It works perfectly well that way. It won't mess up your cycles, and it doesn't get so confusing. Cyclic progesterone works fine. The problem is it's much more complicated. It gets confusing when the cycle doesn't do what you expect it to do, and then people end up messing it up. And then when you mess it up, it starts making your periods really irregular and wonky. And so the best way to use progesterone is to just take one every day. It protects your endometrium. It gives you the benefit that you get from progesterone every day instead of just 14 days out of the month. It's very different than birth control pills. So hormone replacement therapy is not taking over the function of the ovaries. With birth control pills, they basically shut the ovaries down and then take over the function. And that's why they cycle them. But for hormone replacement therapy, that's not what we're doing. We're just adding back that little bit of hormone that the ovary isn't making anymore. And you need that little bit of hormone each day of your cycle, not just half the days. So I encourage you to stop using the cyclical method. Take one of the progesterone every day. It works best that way. It's simplest. It's easiest to remember. You're less likely to mess up, and your body will respond really well to it. So that's my advice.
Okay. Jessica has a question about libido. She said she's been on oral Winona for 1 month. Most symptoms are so much better, yay, but no difference in libido yet. When might that change, or is there something I should tweak in my prescription?
So generally, libido is one of those ones that for most people tends to take some time to come back. Some of these things like hot flushes and sleep disruptions, those tend to be early wins, and people get better pretty quickly. There's continued improvement. But libido, weight gain is another one, hair and skin changes, muscle mass, those things tend to take a lot longer to really see benefit. My advice is really give it 3 months. So you get a dose, unless there's horrible side effects, stick with that for 3 months. And then you reassess. And how are things now compared to when I started? If things are improving and it looks like they're continuing to improve, stay with that dose. If you've plateaued and you're not really where you want to be, or there's just stuff that hasn't come back yet, then it might be time to tweak the dose. But I think at 1 month, it's really a little bit early to do that. The other thing with libido in particular is that it tends to be multifactorial. It's almost never one thing. Certainly the hormones can be a big part of it, but there are probably other things going on that are really important for libido. Things like stress, relationship issues, just being too tired to have sex. There's a lot of things like that as well. So it's really usually a multifactorial approach. So you might want to start thinking about what else in my life can I change around a little bit to help improve things. And that is also important. But I would give it a full 3 months really before you start thinking about tweaking the dose. I think there's a pretty good chance that things are going to continue to improve there for you.
Krista has a question. It's about irregularity. So she said she started her period after taking progesterone and estrogen cream and DHEA. Previously, she had not had a period for 1 year, and she's had 2 periods in the past 2 months since taking all the meds on April 6th.
So it's not unusual for the hormones to trigger a period when they're first started. And that usually happens in the first month or so. Really, if you're beyond 3 months and you're still having periods that you weren't having before taking the medicine, especially if they're frequent or regular, or heavy, that's something that really should bring attention and probably needs to be looked at. Periods at the very beginning, pretty normal and not necessarily dangerous. Annoying, sure. But it usually goes away after 1 or 2 cycles, and then things get back to whatever your normal is. So it's got to be annoying. You haven't had a period in a year, and all of a sudden, boom, you've got 2 in the past 2 months. Most likely, that's going to mellow back out, and things are going to go back to your normal. I think it's safe to give it more time.
Okay, we have a question about a topic that came up last week. I know there was a new article that came out about the link between cancer and estrogen. And so we have someone who's asking, they say they're curious about the news that came out about the link between estrogen and breast cancer last week. Does this change doctors' views on HRT at all?
The news I saw, if we're talking about the same thing, says that estrogen doesn't cause breast cancer. Which we already knew that. So there's a couple of really big studies that showed that the estrogen component of HRT is not linked to an increased breast cancer risk. In fact, women that took estrogen only HRT because they'd had a hysterectomy did not have an increased risk of breast cancer in one study. And in another study, they actually had a slight improvement in risk. In other words, they had a lower risk of breast cancer. That was small, but the bottom line is the estrogen alone did not seem to increase the risk of breast cancer in 2 really large studies. Women that were on estrogen and progesterone combination do have a slight increased risk of breast cancer, but that breast cancer increase is really small. And when you weigh it against everything else and you look at life expectancy, women that start hormone replacement therapy before 60 that are good candidates for hormone replacement therapy have a longer life expectancy than women that never had hormone replacement therapy at all. They live longer and they live healthier lives. So even if there's a slight increase of breast cancer with estrogen and progesterone, that increased risk of breast cancer is tempered by decreased risk of other things that can cause you harm. And so the balance is that hormone replacement therapy actually helps you live a longer, healthier life. So I'm not sure if that's the news that you're referring to. I saw that hit the news, I don't know, a week and a half ago, and I kind of laughed. I'm like, we've done this for a very long time, but it's funny what hits the news. So yeah, I think there was a recent study that kind of came out and resaid that, but it's data that we're already very aware of. Mm-hmm. By the way, if you have a family history of breast cancer, even if it's a strong family history, hormone replacement therapy is still safe for you. Really for all the reasons we just talked about. The only exception would be if you have one of these genetic predispositions to breast cancer, then it may not be a great idea. So for instance, the BRCA or the Lynch syndromes. For those things, hormone replacement therapy may not be safe. But even a very strong family history of breast cancer, hormone replacement therapy is safe.
Okay. We have a sort of a repeat question, I guess, just asking for additional confirmation from someone else entirely. Donna says she has the same question about her cycle having stopped for a little over a year, and it's now starting back after being on the treatment for 1 month.
Yeah, again, that first month or 2, sometimes that will trigger a period. But again, it should be sort of a 1 or a 2 time thing, and then things should go back to normal. Now, every now and then you have somebody that hasn't had periods for other reasons, and the hormone replacement therapy sort of cures that. But the vast majority of people, they haven't had a period for a long time because they're perimenopausal. We give them HRT, they have a period or two, and then it goes away again, just like it was before.
Okay. A follow-up from, I think Krista had asked, oh wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. So sorry. I'll go in order. How's that? The question is from Lourdes. She says she wants to know if our DHEA is from a natural source and is it in pill form?
So yes, our DHEA is plant-based and it comes in pill form. You know, it's interesting. When we first started this venture, I knew that people were selling DHEA in cream form. And I talked to our compound pharmacist. I said, that'd be cool if we could have like one cream to rule it all. You know, you just put everything in one cream. And they're like, well, we'll do it for you, but the DHEA doesn't work as a cream. I'm like, well, people sell it that way. They go, oh yeah, we make it for people that way. And like rolled their eyes, but it doesn't work. So the DHEA apparently does not absorb well through the skin. Doesn't mean people won't sell it to you that way, because unfortunately people will sell all kinds of snake oil. But the DHEA just doesn't work well as a cream. And so we don't do that because we don't sell snake oil. We sell the real deal. What we sell works. And if it doesn't work, we're not gonna provide it. And so we only provide DHEA in a pill form. It comes as a gel cap. One of the cool things about the DHEA and how we source it that sort of has evolved, kind of makes me excited, is we've gotten big enough now that we're buying DHEA in the millions of pills at a time. I think our last order was 2 or 3 million pills. And when you're buying that kind of quantity, you have a lot of say over what's going on. And so we have a lot of control over our DHEA. We're able to make sure that we really get the real deal, the top quality stuff that's safe and effective. And so that's one of the really good things, about growing actually, is that once you are able to order that kind of quantity, the manufacturers do what you ask them to do. It's sort of like the Costco thing. You see all kinds of stuff in Costco that's packaged in ways you'll never see it because Costco can demand companies to package stuff the way they want or they won't sell it. And so it's kind of cool. We've gotten to the point where we can kind of do that with our DHEA. So I'm actually kind of excited and proud of that because I know that we have DHEA that you get what we say you're going to get. It comes from plant-based sources. It is what it is, and that's because it's a supplement. You don't always know that's the case. So when you buy stuff, on Amazon or wherever, you don't really know what you're getting. And so for us, we're able to control what we're getting and make sure that we're providing the stuff that really works for you.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, someone has a question about why they were prescribed pills instead of the cream and what's the difference?
So the why is going to be impossible for me to answer because number one, I don't have your chart in front of me, and maybe I was the one that made that decision, but it might not even been my thinking. But I can kind of talk about the difference between the pills and the creams. The first thing is, in my opinion, they all work well. Pills, cream, patch, they're all going to work. Again, if they didn't work, we wouldn't provide them. And so no matter which way, it's going to be okay, and it's going to provide relief. The weird thing is, some people respond better to one than the other. Every now and then we have somebody, we put them on the pills and it just doesn't seem to work for them, and we switch them to the cream and all of a sudden, boom, they get relief. Or we have somebody that's been on the cream and it's not working and we switch them to the pill and boom, they get relief. And I don't know why that is. Who knows? The human body is so complex and everyone is, unique, that sometimes these things can't be predicted. That's pretty uncommon though. For most people, honestly, either way, they're going to be fine. The advantage to the pill, for some people, they like taking the pill better than using a cream. And for some people, they find it more convenient. It's what they're used to. Other people really like the idea of using a cream. And for them, it's more convenient. It really comes down to personal choice. There's some theoretical advantages to the cream because it bypasses what's called first pass metabolism. So when you take a pill, that all goes to the liver first and then sort of goes to the rest of the body. And when you have something as a cream, it gets absorbed into the full circulation, and it just gets to the liver a little bit at a time. I mean, the liver still ends up metabolizing it, doesn't get this big shot of it all at once. In theory, that decreases the strain on the liver. For most people, it's not enough of a difference to really be important. But for some people, it is. And so, honestly, probably the reason you got prescribed the pill is that's what you stated was your preference during onboarding. Because, again, as I sort of stated at the beginning, my job isn't to tell you what to do. My job is to educate you about your choices, and then you decide what's best for your body. So if there's somebody that wants to do something that is safe and a reasonable choice, even if it's not the way I would necessarily do it, I'm happy to provide that for them. If it's something that's dangerous, I won't do it. But if it's safe and reasonable, and even if it's not my preference, I'm not the one that has to use it. And so that's probably why you got prescribed the pill, although I don't know all the ins and outs, of course, of your story. But the pills are perfectly acceptable, and they work well. If you'd rather have the cream, you can just message your doctor and they can switch you over at your next refill if you want to do that.
It looks like whoever asked the question about research sent us the link to the story, which is, I think, maybe different than what we were talking about. I'm not sure. It's a Harvard Medical School study, so they've included the link for us to look at about the estrogen issue.
Is there a TLDR on that?
I think. What is there? Let's see.
Oh, this one goes the other way. Yeah, it says, sorry, I'm pulling the link up. I guess I shouldn't do this, but okay. So first of all, this isn't a study. This is a article for the general public about a study, which is a lot different. Well, I can tell you that, yeah, I'm not going to sit here and read this, obviously. That's funny because there was another headline article that came out in the last week or two saying that, hey, estrogen isn't linked to breast cancer and HRT, which we already knew. I can tell you that there are very large studies that say estrogen is safe to take and is not a breast cancer risk in hormone replacement therapy doses.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Oh, okay. Sorry, there's a follow-up. I just skipped. I think we have a lot of people weighing in. Somebody is asking as a follow-up, are periods due to progesterone cream and DHEA or both? I'm assuming that means when you're getting it after not having had it for X amount of time.
It's usually the cream is the culprit, although I have had people that I've started on just DHEA and they get a period as well. So it's possible for the DHEA to do that, although it's more likely to be from the cream. But again, stick with it. Don't stop one or the other. Stick with it. Things will get back to normal, almost certainly.
I think that was at least so far. Anybody else who has questions, please put them in the chat because we'd love to keep answering your questions. Otherwise, you're just going to hear Dr. Green and I talk to each other.
Probably clickbait. Yeah, that's that's pretty much what everything is these days.
Yeah. Or yeah, the worst of it is it'll end up being a really old reference to something that's 5 years ago, but they'll repurpose it so that we all, yeah.
So here's the problem with, well, since we got some dead time, here's the thing about scientific studies that most people don't realize. One of the things that they really teach us in medical school and residency is how to read the scientific literature critically. When I get a journal, the first thing I do is look at the titles. And usually 80% of what's in there is either junk or irrelevant. And that leaves just a few articles left. And then I read the abstract. And of that, if I'm lucky, there's one or two articles that are worth reading. And for those, usually there's real significant problems with the articles. And so one of the things that I know how to do as a physician is to read these articles critically and look for the flaws. And honestly, the first thing I do is, does it pass the test of, does this make sense? A lot of times things come out that's just, that doesn't make any sense. And so then you have to look and see, what did they do to either skew the results, or what mistake was made, or why are they getting this crazy result? And every now and then it's true. But even then, based on one study, I wouldn't change the way that I would do things. I want to see several people come out with studies done, maybe approached differently, that all show the same trend or the same thing before I'm going to really change my practice. And that's really a safety thing. So you don't want to keep doing things the same way forever, because that's the way I've always done them. That's a terrible reason to do something. But you don't want to just change, you want to blow with the wind, and every time somebody comes out with a new study, change things as well. So when you have a very established thing, for instance, that estrogen and hormone replacement therapy does not increase the risk of breast cancer, which we know from several extremely large and well-done studies, when you get sort of one study come out that contradicts that, it makes you scratch your head and say, why is their study different than all these really huge, big studies? And most of the time it's because they didn't do their study right, or they kind of skewed it on purpose. You got to remember that the goal in academia is to publish research. And so it's a lot easier to publish something that's interesting than something that's boring. So if you just find the same old thing that everybody knew about, it's going to be a lot harder to get it published than if you find some new crazy thing. And so people are always looking for this. And again, it's called publication bias, sort of what we talked about with the Facebook thing, is that it's much more likely to get published something that's sort of different or outrageous or new than something that's run of the mill. So once something's become very established, people don't want to keep, we know that, why are you doing more studies on it? And so there's this sort of push to try to find a new angle on things, and people will design studies specifically in that way. Now, there are other ways that people get studies published. When I was in residency, we had to do an original research project, and you had to spend a lot of time on this with a research professor. So the way I chose my project is I looked at all the attendings, and I'm like, who do I want to work with? And it was like, well, this guy is like super cool, really nice guy, doesn't yell at people, fun to be around. That's who I want to do my research with. So I made an appointment and I said, hey, Dr. Nauman, I'd love to do my research for you. Do you have any projects? And so he said, yeah, here's something that really needs to be looked at, that nobody's looked at, that I think, you can get a publication out of, and it's an important thing. And so that's what we did. And we looked at sexual function after vulvectomy. So for vulvar cancer, we have to do a surgery where we basically remove the vulva. And the question was, how much sexual dysfunction does this cause? And if we sort of cheat a little bit on the surgery and try and do a smaller surgery, can we save all this sexual dysfunction, this grief for women? That was a question that we went to answer. And it turned out that it pretty much didn't matter whether it was a big surgery or a small surgery. Everyone kind of got messed up. And so the answer was, look, don't cheat on the cancer surgery, because you're not going to get them this benefit that you think you might anyway, which is really kind of an important thing to look at. But nobody was really doing those kind of studies on like sexual function at the time. And so because of that, we published that study. We got a very good publication, and I got to give a national talk. But really, the idea was, here's a question that isn't it's not like hard science, but it's still really important that nobody's really looked at. And so that was the way that we got published. Other people will like, gee, if we design a study this way, we tweak it just so we can probably get this result that will like get everybody thinking. And that's another way that people will design studies. And then unfortunately, see people cheat to get the answer they want. I saw one of my colleagues do that in residency. They basically stopped the study as soon as they had statistical significance, which isn't really the right way to do it, so that they could publish it. So there's all kinds of different things about studies. And it's hard, unless you've done it, it's really hard to know. And that's why there's a ton of information on the internet, and it's really easy to go and get information. The hard part is to sort through the information and figure out what's good information and what's bad information. And that's the challenge. And that's where somebody that, knows the ins and outs of this and is sort of an expert in the field is going to have a much easier time negotiating that. Okay, do we have anyone?
We have some other questions. Yes. Jana says, will you be willing to say a bit more about the difference between birth control and bioidentical HRT? I have a gynecologist recommending I start birth control to, quote, take over for my ovaries and stop hormonal cycling of my periods completely. This would mean taking constant birth control dose and not varying it cyclically. Just wanting to better understand the difference between taking a consistent dose of birth control and a constant dose of HRT.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So there's a lot of differences between birth control pills and HRT, and there's similarities. So the big similarity is they both contain estrogen and progesterone. So those are big categories of hormonal compounds. Birth control pills all use a synthetic estrogen and a synthetic progesterone. Ethinyl estradiol is the synthetic estrogen that's typically used in birth control. And then the progesterone is all over the place. And it's really interesting. Drug companies will come up with birth control pills with different progestins. By the way, synthetic progesterone is called a progestin. A natural or a bioidentical progesterone is called progesterone. So when I use those terms. So they'll use different progestins to tweak the side effects. And so they'll say, well, our birth control pill has less androgenic side effects. That's things like acne, hair loss, that kind of stuff. Or our birth control pill has less of these kind of side effects. And it's really because they're using different progestins. To me, that's telling because it tells you all these progestins have side effects, whereas bioidentical progesterone doesn't have these kind of side effects that they're manipulating their birth control pills with. So that's one thing, is that the bioidentical hormones are the exact same hormones that your body makes. It's what your body is designed or built or has evolved to use. And so it's the hormone that the receptors are built for, and it works. The bioidentical hormones work perfectly. They work the same way because they are the same thing that your body makes. The synthetic estrogens and progestins aren't exactly the same, and so they don't work quite as well, and so they throw off these funny side effects, and that's why they can choose a different progestin to get a different side effect out of it. So that's one of the big things, is even though it's still estrogen progesterone, the type of hormones are really different. But the bigger thing is the dose of hormones. Even low dose birth control pills have a huge amount more hormone than hormone replacement therapy. And that's by design, because they're really designed to do different things. Birth control pills are designed, number one, to keep you from getting pregnant. And the way they do that is they take over for the ovary. So they shut the ovary down so the ovary stops making eggs and stops cycling. And that's great if you don't want to get pregnant. It also does a better job than hormone replacement therapy of controlling your cycles. So if you have really miserable cycles, birth control pills are going to work better than hormone replacement therapy at fixing your, miserable bleeding. So those are two things that birth control pills do well. But what they're not designed to do is take care of the symptoms of the menopause transition, and they don't do a very good job of that, not compared to hormone replacement therapy. So it really depends on what you're after as what you want to use. So with a birth control pill, you give this huge amount of hormone that shuts the ovary down and then completely takes over the hormonal milieu of your body. And now, instead of having your bioidentical hormones that the ovaries are making, you're having these synthetic hormones that have different side effects. Again, that works really well at keeping you from getting pregnant, and it works well at controlling your menstrual cycles. But that's not really what you want with hormone replacement therapy. With hormone replacement therapy, you're not shutting the ovary down at all. You're letting the ovary function normally as it normally does, which is beneficial. And then you're adding back a little bit extra of the exact same hormone that the ovary is making, you're just adding a little bit more to it to get it back to where it was when you were younger, because the ovaries become less efficient over time, and so they don't produce as much hormone as they should. And so instead of taking over the whole process, we just add back what's missing. And we add it back in a way that's the same natural hormones that your ovaries are making. And so it's a much more subtle way of doing it, and it works a lot better at relieving these symptoms, because you're not completely overshooting and shutting down your normal function. And so that's the conceptual difference and the theoretical difference between what birth control pills and HRT are designed for. And so you might ask, well, why would my OBGYN recommend birth control pills? One reason might be because he thinks you need contraception, and maybe you do, or maybe it's because your periods are miserable and he wants to control your periods. And if that's the case, that's not necessarily a bad decision. However, if you're also having symptoms of perimenopause, you can actually use both, because the HRT will come along and at least give back some of those bioidentical hormones that you're no longer getting. The other reason that this happens, unfortunately, is that a lot of OBGYNs have not been well trained on hormone replacement therapy. And there's a historical reason for that, in that there was this sort of study that came out again in the early 2000s that basically got everybody scared of HRT. And it was a huge overreaction to the study, but it's what happened. And so people got afraid to use HRT, doctors got afraid to prescribe HRT, and a lot of doctors at the time, and for a long time afterwards in training, the training program stopped teaching about HRT. They're like, look, no one's gonna use this anyway. It's not a history class, there's no point in learning this. And so a lot of people aren't familiar with how hormone replacement therapy should be used. They're very familiar with birth control pills because they write prescriptions for birth control pills all day long to their younger patients. That's one of the most common prescriptions that we write as an OBGYN. And so it's a medicine that we're familiar with and we're comfortable with. And it's estrogen and progesterone, this will work. And it works a little bit, it just doesn't work as well. But when that's what you're comfortable with, that's what you end up prescribing. And so a lot of people get something that works okay, but isn't really the best thing. And so for the symptoms of the menopause transition, true hormone replacement therapy with bioidentical hormones is really the best thing. And birth control pills is sort of, okay, but really not great. And so that's kind of, I would say in a nutshell, but how about in a giant garage of the difference between birth control pills and hormone replacement therapy. So again, I haven't seen a lot of questions, so I'm kind of taking the long approach to these. I hope that's okay, but a little education.
Good. Okay, we have it's more of a comment, but it's piggybacking on the previous questions. This person was mentioning that they had a period that started up after not having one for a year, and that they're also noticing soreness in the right arm since they started taking HRT or whatever products they're taking. They're saying they have a kink if they move it a certain way in their arm, soreness in the arm.
That's a funny side effect. It's not a side effect that's sort of a known side effect of hormone replacement therapy. I never say never, because the human body, again, is so complex that sometimes weird things happen. But that's not a typical side effect of the HRT. I wonder if maybe something else happened around the same time you started your HRT. That you slept on it funny, or you slipped and you forgot about it, and you're kind of happened at the same time frame, so you're linking it. But it's not really something that is typically associated with hormone replacement therapy.
Okay. Lourdes has a question. She says, do you recommend estradiol vaginal cream for issues with dryness and discomfort? And is all estradiol made from natural resources? Also, if you're already on bioidentical estrogen therapy, can you also use vaginal estradiol therapy?
Great question. So vaginal estrogen cream is the best thing for vaginal symptoms, particularly vaginal atrophy, which is a thinning of the vagina that can then cause soreness and dryness and irritation. It can also cause problems with the bladder, it can cause pain with sex. And so vaginal estrogen cream works great for that. The problem with vaginal estrogen cream is that's pretty much all it works for, and it won't help the other symptoms of the perimenopause. It's not going to do much for your hot flushes and your night sweats and your insomnia and your brain fog and all that other stuff. It's dynamite for the vagina, but not so good for everything else. It's not bad for everything else, it just doesn't help much. The other, what we call systemic estrogen treatments, that's the pills or the patches or the body cream, that works for everything. So it works for all your other symptoms, and it also works for the vaginal symptoms. It doesn't work as well or as quickly as the vaginal cream, but it does help. And for most people, it ends up being enough. But for some people that have really significant vaginal symptoms, the vaginal cream is going to be where they want to go. And it's fine to use both. So I have a lot of patients who have really significant vaginal symptoms, but they also have significant other symptoms. And for them, it works great to use a systemic hormone replacement, like a pill or a patch or a cream, and then also use the vaginal estrogen cream. And those two in combination can be really dynamite and kind of take care of everything. If you can get away with just a systemic treatment, it's enough, and it is enough to take care of the vaginal symptoms. Obviously, it's easier to use one thing than two, but if the vaginal symptoms are really significant, then that's a good thing to use. Estradiol is estradiol, and generally, I think it's all made from similar sources, but there are other kinds of estrogens. Premarin is a common one that's used as a vaginal cream that really is not. There's also synthetic estrogens that are really very different. So a Premarin vaginal cream is a very common vaginal cream. Premarin comes from pregnant mare urine. It comes from the urine of pregnant horses. And it has a ton of different estrogens in it. Some of them are found in the human body, but a lot of them are not found in the human body. They're really for horses. And so you get a lot of sort of junk in there that you don't really need. And so to me, it's like, why use that when you can use the bioidentical estradiol? It makes more sense.
Okay. Krista is saying, thank you for answering her question. We're getting a lot of thank yous. Everybody's thanking you. Yeah, I think that's it. We have lots of thank yous, Dr. Green, which is good. Yeah. Everybody's happy with what you said. So,
all right. Well, I'm glad I could help.
That's great. Does anybody else have questions? We still have a few minutes. Anything else anyone wants to ask that they haven't asked? Like we should have some background whole Jeopardy music going.
Be a good joke,
right?
One we can tell. And
oh, good. Jana wants to know: do you know if bioidentical HRT has any effect on endometriosis?
So, the vast majority of people with endometriosis do well on HRT. The dose is small enough that it should not reactivate endometriosis. Again, everybody's different, and you'll hear these nightmare stories of somebody where it did do that, but it's very unusual. In some cases, if people's endometriosis is really severe, this is one of the few cases where we might add progesterone to the estrogen, even if someone doesn't have a uterus. That's, at least in theory, should make it even less likely to activate endometriosis. But hormone replacement therapy in general is fine with endometriosis, and it's really unlikely to reactivate it. So yeah, they are compatible.
That's good. Any last minute? Anybody else? Just one thank you. That's good. You're welcome, Jenna, and everybody else who said thank you. Dina. Let's skip everything. We got everybody.
Oh, a bit of a quiet crowd tonight, but that's okay.
Yeah, well, it's all right.
I got to go a little bit deep on questions, which is kind of my preference, but
and that's your specialty.
I don't want to bore people.
That's Dr. Green's specialty. He unpacks it all for you. So you can never walk away saying you didn't learn something new from our webinar. That's good. Yeah, everybody, thank you for your questions. And
just want to say the Facebook group is great. I don't want to, I hope I didn't discourage you. Go on the Facebook group. There's a lot of help there. It's really nice that you can have this peer-to-peer help. And I think it's a really good thing. Be careful about getting your medical advice there. That's what we're for. So, you have access to us anytime. Just ask a question in the portal. and we're very happy to answer that offline as well as online. So don't be shy about messaging your doctor if you have a concern or a question.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a really big thing for all of you. If you're in the group, just remember, the doctors are here for the questions, and everybody else is for community support. So we try to help everybody not ask the medical questions. So if you're getting your questions denied, that's why we're just trying to help move you towards asking in the patient portal as opposed to asking your peers, because your peers are not physicians. So yeah. Oh, Lourdes has one final question, wondering if we offer bioidentical vaginal cream.
Yes, we do. We have a compounded estradiol cream, and again, a vaginal cream that works really well. So you can talk to your doctor about that, and we're very happy to prescribe that for you if it's indicated.
Anybody else? Going once, going twice. Okay. Well.
All right. Well, we'll be here next time.
Any closing shares before we go, or are you good?
I think I'm shared out.
You're shared out? Okay. Well, this concludes our current patient webinar for this month, but please share with your friends who are needing support or thinking of coming to Winona. We have a prospective webinar for patients who are interested in 2 weeks. Just keep your eye out in the women's group or on social media. If you know anybody who could benefit from Winona, feel free to share that with them. And if you missed any part of this or you want to catch the webinar again and listen to these questions, you can go to the YouTube channel, which is a great place, but it usually takes us a few days before we have the replay. That's the word I'm looking for, replay. Before we have the replay. So don't forget, go to the Winona YouTube channel, which is @bywinona. So youtube.com/@bywinona. And we'll see you guys there. Thank you, everyone.
See y'all. Thanks for coming.
Bye. Thanks, Dr. Green.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.